Hi, I'm Erin Skipper, and at the time of this recording, it is January 2023. And this month marked the 25th year that I've worked for the Transcendental Meditation Organization, although I also am concluding my 25-year career with the Transcendental Meditation Organization. So I wanted to kind of celebrate this time and look at my experiences working within Transcendental Meditation, which is still, by the way, my daily practice. And I have been teaching Transcendental Meditation for about 18 years. So it's been a while. I can't believe it's been that long. How is that even possible? But it has. So I, of course, love it, but I also feel like it's time for me to start doing different projects that are really personal. And so I'm taking some time to focus on that in the coming few months in the next year or so for sure. But it's not just a career. I think this is true for a lot of people that teach transcendental meditation. This is something that we do because we love it. We love the experience of meditation. We love the benefits that it brings us individually. And then we also see the potential for helping to elevate consciousness on the planet as a whole, and how much of huge transformation and shift could occur if consciousness is higher on the planet. So I think this is a thing that motivates a lot of us. It's not the money, it's not the glamour. It's just really a deep desire to see more peace and happiness and love in society and the world as a whole. So this is something that's really near and dear to myself, and I'm sure every other teacher out there. And if you're curious about transcendental meditation and you don't know what it is, the best thing to do is just to find a certified teacher. There are some good videos, and there's an introductory video at tm.org. And from there, you can find a certified teacher anywhere in the world. And once you learn TM, then you have unlimited follow-up available to you with any certified teacher anywhere in the world. So if you relocate, you can work with a teacher in a new location. It's very handy. It's a very simple mental technique. It's done for adults 20 minutes twice a day, sitting comfortably. It's so easy. You sit with the eyes closed. Literally anyone can do it. You don't have to be the meditation type. You don't have to feel like you've done other meditations successfully. And in some ways, it's even better if you haven't, but meditation is so popular nowadays, so probably you have. But yeah, it's very, very simple. And it was introduced to the West by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And the reason that I have this photo of Maharishi up is that this is a photo that my father took in, I think, 1972 in Mallorca, Spain. This was on my mom's teacher training course because both my parents are meditators. And in fact, this goes back 4 generations for me. I'm the 4th generation meditator in my family. And the reason for that was that this is a family photo of my mom and her siblings and parents, so my grandparents. And my 2 aunts on the left side, they learned transcendental meditation in the Los Angeles, well, my aunt Donna learned in Los Angeles because Maharishi taught there for the first few years that he was teaching in the United States. And then my mom, who's on the far right here, she was attending University of Washington in Seattle. And she had seen such a big difference with my aunt that she decided she wanted to learn meditation as well. So they all became TM teachers. And since all of my aunts were teaching TM, my grandparents learned, even my great-grandparents did it. And these are like the loves of my life right here. My mom's mom in the lower right, and myself, and my mom's dad in the upper right. And then my great-grandfather in the upper left. And they all practiced TM. My mom's mom, Grandma Beth, she also learned the advanced techniques of TM and was just a really special woman and artist. And also on my dad's side of the family, my dad became a TM teacher. He learned really young in Berkeley, California in, I think, 1967. And then his mom also learned. So this runs, very, very deep in my family. And my dad became a teacher in 1971 in Colorado. And then soon after that, my mom became a teacher in Mallorca, Spain in 1972. And these are other photos that my dad took of her there. And my parents met, I think, at a group meditation or a retreat. I don't remember which one, but it was in Portland, Oregon in the late 60s. And started dating soon after, got married. After, they became teachers, they got married and had my brother, my older brother, and myself. And to this day, my mom still teaches TM full time. She has been teaching nearly this whole time in the Seattle area, and my dad taught. He actually did other work. He did construction most of my life, but when he had to retire early, he went back to teaching Transcendental Meditation with my mom. And you can see her here, myself and my mom. And then the Seattle Times did an article on what it's like to try Transcendental Meditation. So they interviewed her. And she's a really well-known TM teacher. So it was big shoes to fill, or footsteps to follow, because she's just been so dedicated in teaching all these years. And my parents, after they had us, there was a big call for people to come together and meditate together in a small town in Iowa, Fairfield, Iowa. And it is the home of Maharishi International University. So when I was 3 years old, I enrolled in the college and started there. So actually, I went to preschool on the university campus, and my parents, we moved from the Seattle area, from Port Townsend, where I'm from, to Fairfield because my dad had volunteered to build a big meditation hall. And it was this big golden dome, which you can see standing behind all of these kids. And here I am in the front. These were big buildings where large amounts of people would get together and meditate every day. And this is a gathering of about 7,000 people in Fairfield, Iowa. It's called the Taste of Utopia course, and it happened in, well, this is a picture from 1984, I believe, 1983. And so they had one of these buildings on the campus at Maharishi International University. They built a second one. So they had 2 buildings, and people would come together and meditate. And the reason for this is Maharishi had predicted that if enough people in the world were meditating, then we would see crime levels go down and the quality of life increasing. And these practitioners were doing an advanced technique of TM called the TM cities, including yogic flying, which is the picture in the upper left. And it's not that you're like flying through the air and you stay up. It's not levitation, but it's kind of like a lifting off and coming back down. And it's an extremely blissful practice that Maharishi introduced in around 1978, maybe 1977. He may have started to introduce the TM cities. And siddhi, S-I-D-H-I, is a Sanskrit word. It basically means perfection, but it's to help develop our inner abilities. It's a really amazing technique, which I later went on to learn. But we lived on this campus when I was in preschool, and then we moved back to the Seattle area. And I had this experience when I was young, because I learned meditation when I was 4 years old. Both my brother and I learned it quite young. And I was really, not meditating that much as a child. And I grew up in public schools. I went to some alternative schools when I was really young, and then I grew up mostly going to public schools, which are very different. It's like it's not an environment where you typically meditate twice a day. And I really, sometimes wish that I'd had that experience, but I didn't. And I really longed for it, because we would go back to Fairfield. My mom would go on long meditation retreats, and like over spring break, she would go. And my spring break, my brother and me, when we had spring break in school, she would go on retreats in Iowa. So we would go, and I would attend the Maharishi school during that week. when I was on, holiday, I would go to school. But I remember having such amazing experiences meditating in the class, and it was such a contrast because I really I didn't like public school at all. And my parents had been, they've been working a lot and building a house, so they were really busy. And I was really frustrated with the school experiences that I was having, and really just agitated all the time, and having quite a lot of difficulties in school. And so this contrast of this experience that I had at the Maharishi school when we were visiting was really profound. And I wanted to meditate when I was younger. When I turned 10, which is the time that if children practice transcendental meditation under 10 years old, we do a walking technique with the eyes open. And I'm sure I did it when I was younger because I was in preschool and that was part of it. And then when you turn 10, you learn the sitting technique that adults practice, and it's done sitting with the eyes closed for 10 minutes twice a day if you're 10 years old, and then 15 minutes if you're 15 years old. So you add a minute each year, and then adults practice 20 minutes twice a day. And I had really wanted to meditate, but again, I was going to public school, I was playing sports. That's kind of how I, figured how to just sort of find a way to enjoy school, was sports and the friendships that I made through that. So meditation was not really something I was doing as a teenager much. And I had not that I rejected it fully, but I just didn't do it and didn't really want to have that much to do with it. And after a few years in high school, I had a lot of sports injuries. I couldn't play basketball anymore, and I had quit dancing, and I couldn't really do anything because I had so many sports injuries. And so I really didn't want to be in school anymore. I stayed for a little while, but then I started partying really hard, and then I just felt like I was done with school, and I really kind of spiraled down in a pretty hard way. For a few months, I got really sick, and then I hit a rock bottom, to be honest, and that actually led me to start meditating again. And I had several friends who had overdosed or who had died by suicide, and I really felt like if I continued on the path that I was on, that was going to be it, and I was for sure not going to be around much longer. So it was kind of out of desperation. I just felt like I needed to do something. And I made actually a longer, more extended version of this video, but it was 2 hours. So I decided to record another one where I don't go into as many details. But if you want to get more of the juicy details, I'll post a link to that video in the description for this one. So, you can get a little bit more of the background story. But yeah, so I really was afraid that I was going to die if I continued down the path that I was on, partying and I had been hitchhiking and traveling. And I sat down to meditate one day, and it was this wave of peace that just completely washed over me and enveloped me. And it was so beautiful. And it was just the most calming, relaxing, nourishing thing that I'd felt, because I'd been so stressed and so anxious and so deathly afraid that I was, going to die, that it really transformed me, that experience. I started meditating more regularly, and I actually moved back with my parents. I moved back to their house, and I want to say 17 at the time, but I had not lived with them for a little while. And I really began taking advantage of the fact that, both my parents are meditators, and my mom especially is really into just a lot of knowledge. She has an amazing library of books about Ayurvedic medicine and, herbalism, cooking, gardening, many different New Age and spiritual books, many different indigenous teachings, and, books about different prayer ceremonies. And I just absorbed it. I just read all the time. And this book, Perfect Health by Deepak Chopra, had come out, and because my mom was a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, which was taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, she often would organize events in the Seattle area, and people like Deepak would come because Deepak studied Ayurvedic medicine from Maharishi as well. And so he had come to Seattle a few times, and my mom was very much into this knowledge about Ayurveda, which is, if you're not familiar, Ayurveda is the traditional system of medicine that comes from ancient India. It's really one of the oldest systems of healthcare in the world. It's very sophisticated. It involves food, yoga, breathing techniques like pranayama, but it's so extensive. I mean, these are modalities that are quite popular and well known these days, but it's so extensive and involves many, many different teachings to promote balance and wellness for individuals. And I read this book, I was so into it, and I started doing the yoga, the sun salutations that are taught in it. And I just read every book about Ayurveda at the time that I could. And my mom had many, many books, she still does, about Ayurveda. So I was really, really interested in it. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do Panchakarma, and I didn't know how or when. And I had, it was in the fall of 1995 that I really started diving into this. And in 1996, I left home again, and I traveled to San Francisco, and then I came back and did some work for a little while. And then I moved to a remote island off the northwest coast of Washington State. I moved to Orcas Island, which is in the San Juans. And I lived there. I camped out for a while, and I had a really good time just like living in nature, doing yoga. I was eating and cooking at a restaurant at Dobe Cafe on the east side of the island. And, there were a lot of local farms and gardens that I could get fresh produce from. So I was living like a very natural lifestyle, trying to get healthy and just take care of myself. But I knew I wanted to do more, and winter was approaching, and living outside, camping outside in the winter is not the best idea. So I was trying to figure out what else I could do. And my mom told me about an opportunity to train to do the Ayurveda Panchakarma technician training. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I left the Northwest, and on January 1st, 1998, this is when I started my professional career working in organizations that offer Maharishi's Transcendental Meditation and Maharishi Ayurveda. So January 1st, 1998, I started working at the Maharishi Ayurveda Health Center in Lancaster, Massachusetts. It's no longer there operating as a Panchakarma center. It's the Thayer Mansion, and it was recently purchased by a private family who hosts community events there. It was also featured in the movie Little Women, the most recent remake of that. And in the bottom right, it's kind of an interesting photo of Dr. Jay Glazer and Dr. Tony Nader and Deepak Chopra. Now, at the time, Deepak Chopra had been the director of this particular center, and then he left. So when I arrived in 1998, he wasn't there, and Dr. Tony Nader, who's in the middle, also was not there. But coincidentally, the past few years, I've been working for him because I have been working for Maharishi Foundation International until January 2023. That's what I was doing. And that's been an amazing experience. But I was studying his teachings and taking his courses about the physiology and Vedic literature and how to develop higher states of consciousness. I was, really diving into his courses even in 1998. And I just think it's funny that even now I'm still learning from him. And Dr. Jay Glazer on the left was the medical director when I was working there in 1998. So this is just a cool photo. I think my friend Charles Baker sent me this photo. I don't know if he took it or who actually took this photo, but Charles Baker probably took it. And a little bit about what Panchakarma is. Some people might be familiar with this modality of Shirodhara. Shiro is head and Dara means to pour. It's a Sanskrit word, Shirodhara, to pour oil on the head. And this is a technique that really settles the entire nervous system because there's so many nerve endings there in the forehead above the eyes. And the oil is poured back and forth. And this goes on for about 20 minutes, but there are many other aspects to Panchakarma. And so Panchakarma is a term that describes a sequence of treatments and herbal preparation. This could involve, for me, when I've done it recently, I've actually spent months doing preparation of eating certain foods to help balance my physiology and taking certain herbs and then prescribe certain treatments when you go through the series. And it's, I'm telling you, like one of the most like life-transforming, life-saving things that I've ever experienced. And because it's not just like massage and oil treatments, it's a whole comprehensive package of treatments that are specially tailored specifically for you when you go through it. So it really helps to balance out your physiology and your imbalances, or to help create more balance if you already are healthy. But there are also programs that you can do for like a week or 2 or 3 weeks or even longer if you have more ongoing chronic disorders. And it has, I swear, just saved me so many times. And the best I've ever felt in my life has been after Panchakarma. So I got to live and work there and, train in this modality. And I trained with a woman from Germany, and on the left is me in the upper left, and then my trainer on the other side of the picture of Maharishi, and one of my best friends still to this day who I met on that training course, Christine Shrum, and then the Ayurvedic doctor below and his family who were amazing. It was just like we all lived together in this big building, and it was like a family of, really cool people from all over the world, and people would travel from all over the world to come have treatments here at this particular place. And there Christine and me on our training, and me getting the Abhyanga massage. And when I wasn't doing Panchakarma, I was in the garden. The Thayer Mansion in its heyday in the early 20th century would have like at least 40 full-time gardeners on, working around the clock not around the clock, but working around the gardens, around the property to maintain all the species, all of the special like gardens. But I had planted all these tulips and different plants out front. And funny story that I did share in the longer version of the video that I recorded was that George Harrison was there when I was working a few times, and I would come in from gardening and like my hands were all dirty. And one time I was at the utility sink in the basement about to wash my hands, and in comes George Harrison, and I'm just standing there like like totally dumbfounded and starstruck. And I couldn't even like think how to turn on the sink to wash my hands. And he kind of reached down. He was like, "Let me get that for you." So it was really, it was cool because he was just so down to earth. And there were a lot of people that came through this particular place and really all of the locations that I've worked at. But, to meet George Harrison, my first week of work was something. So after working here for about a year, and by the way, like I have actually done Panchakarma a few times recently, even though this facility doesn't exist anymore. There are many more that do exist in Fairfield, Iowa. There's the Raj and several clinics in Europe, and even in India, Delhi, there's a Maharishi Ayurveda hospital, but there are Ayurveda centers now. It's so popular. It's so wild to see this become so popular because growing up when I was a kid, like my mom would make me rice and dal, and my lunch would consist of that. When I would go to school, I would take, like Ayurvedic food in my thermos. and it was just so unheard of in yoga and meditation. It was just such a weird thing, and now it's so popular, and it's so cool to see that, because it's really just very simple but very important knowledge to have, I think, to be able to really take care of your mind and your body and spirit. So yeah, lots of places and lots of resources. I do have a link on my website that I'll post if anyone's interested in those as well. Now, I was living here and working with all these TM teachers who had been, doing it for 20, 30, 40 years. And I spent a lot of time with Maharishi, and I was really getting inspired. I really wanted to learn more and grow more with my experiences, and I was inspired to do the TM City course to learn that yogic flying technique. And coming back to that, it is something that there have been a lot of actual studies showing that crime rates, violent crime, will decrease when there are enough people meditating together. And this is largely known as the Maharishi effect, because Maharishi is the one that inspired this research to be done. Sometimes it's referred to as the meditation effect, but but it really comes from this source of Maharishi's vision to have scientific research on the effects of consciousness and meditation, because it's such an invisible thing. If somebody sits and closes their eyes, you think, well, what's it going to do? But so much is happening internally, and it creates this field effect of peace and coherence and love in the environment. And John Hagelin led a lot of the research and helped organize a lot of these events. And this was an interesting one in these Washington, D.C. studies, because they would have, thousands of people come together, and crime rate would go down by 23.3% in summer, which is really unheard of. And this has been replicated many times. So it's a field effect. This is that group in Washington, D.C. meditating. This was, I believe, in the early 90s. There were so many different times. And I remember in the 80s, a few groups gathered in Washington, D.C. that my mom would go to and participate in that. So I did learn the TM Cities. I started this yogic flying technique, which is really again, it's not like you're levitating, but it's more just like a complete freedom, because you're actually functioning, like your body starts to function from that unified field. It's really powerful, also really simple and very blissful. It feels kind of like a flying dream, if you've ever had one of those, when you just feel very free and light. So I decided that I was going to go back to preschool. Actually, okay, so the same campus where I went to preschool, Maharishi International University. I started going to school there, I believe, in 1999, the fall of 99. And so here I am as a young hippie kid. And one of the things I will say, when I was working at Lancaster, I started to have really intense inspiration and drive to largely inspired actually by some things that were happening at the time in Kosovo. There was some, I don't even remember the details if it was war, but there was something happening in Kosovo that was really dangerous, or similar to what we have happening right now in Europe between Ukraine and Russia. And in the US, I just actually relocated from the US, and it's there's so much turmoil and violence, and there's so many problems. There's so many things in the world that we want, I want to experience peace. I think a lot of us want to live in a world where we feel safe, where it's peaceful, where there's people aren't hating or killing each other because of the color of their skin or their religious beliefs or whatever it is. And this might sound really naive, but this is something that's always been really important for me, and a huge, again, motivator for why I've taught meditation for so long. And when I left Lancaster, I was having really just a strong desire to organize events like benefit concerts and festivals that would bring together people either with meditation or, we'd have like yoga and meditation and ceremonies for peace, and talking about like what can actually be done to create drastic shifts in consciousness around the world. And, I'd been studying all about the effects of meditation, and there are many, many valuable things that we can do. And I think the core of it, what really changes things, is the experience of love. And this unified field is a field in which we are all connected, whether we realize it or not. And I think when those boundaries and this illusion of separation start to dissipate, we realize that like we really are a big family, and we may have differences. Even in our individual immediate family, we might have differences, but there is also the capacity to have harmonious relationships, even though there may be differences. And so I was really motivated to organize concerts and events, and I decided to dive a little bit deeper into my meditation practice. I had really good experiences when I went on a 2-week retreat at the beginning of my second semester in college. I went to this campus in Boone, North Carolina. It's no longer owned by the Transcendental Meditation organization. It's a different organization now. I think it's the Art of Living Fellowship. But I lived in the building on the far right. On the far right, the very end of that building, I stayed there for a little over a year, doing long hours of meditation and studying technologies for developing higher states of consciousness and creating world peace. And this was such a deep desire of mine. And while I was there, I met a woman named Penny Hintz, or Penny Bell. And she's now known as Penny Hintz because she got married shortly after that time. But her maiden name was Penny Goodman, and then Penny Bell. And I just want to say this in case people know her from different times, because I'm really grateful that I met Penny. It turns out she had known my aunts in Idaho, and I was telling her about these concerts and events that I wanted to do, and she said, "Oh, you should have David Lynch do it." And she started telling me about David Lynch, and I didn't know who David was, even though I grew up actually in Issaquah and Sammamish, Washington, which is like 15 minutes from Snoqualmie and North Bend, where Twin Peaks was filmed. I had no idea who David was because I was young when Twin Peaks came out, but I had seen Elephant Man when I was a child. I watched it with my grandma and really loved it. So I had this like, this sort of spark that David was the person to do it, because when Penny talked about him, I just knew that he was going to be the one to talk at events for like college students and younger people who are artists, and inspire them about meditation, or at least even, inspire the thought even to think about it. So this is more on that campus, a little bit up the road. These are some of the other buildings there. And this is me, just as on the right, closer to when I was actually leaving this Maharishi Spiritual University of America. Now it's Maharishi University of Enlightenment, but I studied there for a while, and then I went back to Seattle after 9/11. I had a really profound experience on 9/11 where the day before I was in my room in that building on the campus, and this light shone out of my heart. It was just like a movie projector shining. And I saw all the images of what happened on 9/11. I saw the planes crashing into the buildings, people jumping out to their deaths. And it was so like traumatic, this image for me. I thought that I was going crazy. And then the next day when we found out about 9/11 on 9/11, when it was announced, I realized that this had been a premonition of what was going to happen. And for me, like kind of, this was so intense. I was like, how could I have seen it? I don't have anything to do with that. But I had, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, had premonition dreams every night where I would see the exact thing that would happen the next day. But now it was happening during the day, and I was awake, and this light was coming out of my heart. And it was so profound. And it made me realize that, you know, because we are all connected in the unified field, and there is no like time, space, and locations, these boundaries don't really exist. You know, they do in this third dimensional reality that we live in on this planet, but there are other dimensions and there are other planes of existence, and we can tap into that, and a lot of people do anyway with their intuition, even, you know, whether they're meditating or not. There are so many highly sensitive people and empaths on the planet, especially now, I think, that are so dialed into these finer levels of existence in which we are all deeply connected. And just in the same way that we can receive information, we can also emit light and love. And this is how this Maharishi effect works. It's through this radiance of our inner experience of love and joy and unbounded freedom of the mind and the heart. Our consciousness, this field of consciousness, radiates out just like a light bulb. You know, you turn on the light in the room and the darkness starts to disappear. So I left this place. I just felt so compelled after 9/11 to go out into the world and to start organizing events. And I knew that I was going to invite David Lynch at some point. And first, before I went back to college, I went to Seattle because I had a friend, Jonathan Ponham, on there on the right, who owns Sub Pop Records, and they helped launch Nirvana's career and was really responsible for the grunge scene in the Seattle area and in the 90s and late 80s, 90s. And so Jonathan and I, he had also learned Transcendental Meditation when he was young, and we had been talking about like, well, what can we do? Who can we, you know, have like talk to people about the value and benefit of meditation. And so we would get together and sort of brainstorm, but we didn't really know, like TM wasn't really cool or hip at the time. It had been in the 60s and 70s, of course, you know, like the Beatles did it and they spent time with Maharishi, and there were lots of times that TM was very much in the mainstream popular culture, but this was not the case in like the late 90s, early 2000s when all this was happening. And we didn't really come up with a solution, but I eventually went back to Maharishi International University, and I had 2 more years of college. I decided to get my degree in Ayurvedic medicine, so I went back there, and I spent a year just, you know, sort of, I'd been just meditating like really deeply for about a year, and it takes some time. It's like kind of reintegrating into society. In my last year of college there, I decided that I wanted to do some things, and I just wanted to share another picture of this is a photo of me in my Halloween costume that I made in my senior year of college, the Luna Moth, that my friend Radim Schreiber took this picture. And around this time, in the fall of my senior year, I was living with my friend Lisa, and I was telling her about some of the things that I wanted to organize for students, and she also had a friend who was talking about the same thing, and it's this guy Eli who is sitting next to me here in the white sweatshirt, our sweater, and Eli Tesfaye. And so we got together, we put out a call to students to have the student club, and Matt Rector above me, and Senja Hawkins on the far left, and then Einar Jorgensen on the right from Norway. We all got together and formed this student club, Students for Peace, and we worked together that entire year, because it was a big project. We had asked Bob Roth to you know, come on board and help us get David Lynch to come talk, and many other speakers. We wanted to invite different peace activists from around the country and around the world, really, you know, because we have things to offer, but we wanted to invite many people so that we could like collaborate and, you know, just brainstorm and inspire each other to work for peace even more, because it's always of value to do so, I think. And I think it's really important to collaborate, because I know for my experience and myself, sometimes we get so like locked into our own world and like we see things our own way. But I think it's really important to expand not just our consciousness, but also our understanding and our comprehension, and to learn from each other to see things in a different way. So I was graduating my senior year. We still didn't have the event because it actually took a lot longer to plan than we realized. But I was just about to graduate, and Bob Roth had asked me to come work for him. And I said, well, yes, but I'm working on this event, and David Lynch is going to come talk. And he's like, yeah, well, work with me and we'll work on it together. So this was amazing, because I don't know if you know who Bob Roth is, but he has been involved in teaching meditation, and he's done a lot of like activism throughout his life since he was a college student, and he's taught so many people transcendental meditation. He's kind of a legend, and he was my mentor, and he picked me out and like wanted to work with me. So this was incredible. There's a really good clip. I'll post this link in the description as well, where Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey are talking about him. I mean, he's been on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and a lot of people that he's taught and worked with. He's, he's been on Good Morning America and many of their shows, but he taught both Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey. So they're talking about him in this clip. And it was just an incredible experience, because I worked so closely with Bob, and then John Hagelin, who is here next to me in the white suit. And of course, David Lynch there on the far right. This was the first event that he spoke at. And this was the weekend when David decided to do the David Lynch Foundation. And John Hagelin and Bob Roth and David had been working closely for a couple of years, because, there had been school shootings in the US, and David was really feeling compelled to do something to help children and students. And so they had been visiting some schools and holding some press conferences, trying to inspire people to utilize meditation to alleviate stress and violence in schools. And I was in the room with Bob Roth, and it was the first night just before the weekend conference, and David said he was going to do the David Lynch Foundation. And so I was there working with them very closely from the very beginning. However, I worked really hard, and I was having some health issues that I hadn't really talked about or told anyone about, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was starting to, realize that I needed to kind of step away and like take care of myself. And I met somebody really amazing, and we were just having a really good time together. And I ended up leaving Fairfield and going to Florida to work and live with Peter Wallace here in the middle. And we worked in his art gallery. So that's me in the left, in his art gallery. And Peter is an amazing person. And he had spent a lot of time traveling and being a seeker when he was a teenager. He grew up in Beverly Hills, and, his family always had like all the big celebrities over for dinner. And he came from this, very, very material and successful background with his family, but he left. He went and traveled Europe and India, and he spent a lot of time at Anandamoyama's ashram, spent a lot of time, studying with her. And she told him to go learn from Maharishi. So he did. He went and lived and studied in Maharishi's ashram, and then eventually introduced Maharishi to his brother, who was a student at UCLA. And that was Keith Wallace, that's his brother. And he did the first studies on transcendental meditation, verifying that when you're meditating, you're actually experiencing a fourth state of consciousness that's different from waking, sleeping, and dreaming states. So that was a really interesting experience, I have to say. Peter has the most amazing stories. And I was living and working with him. We spent a lot of time gardening. I would go to the beach and swim with dolphins on my days off. And the thought of becoming a TM teacher at that time was like the last thing on my mind. But while I was there, I got a phone call, and my mom was on a teacher recertification course. This was in 2005. And this guy, Mario Orsatti, who's here on the left with David Lynch, she's the one standing up, he told my mom that there was a teacher training course starting and that I should become a TM teacher, because he had worked with me with Bob Roth and David on some of those early events. And Mario now does a lot of the interviews and podcasts for the TM Talks, which were airing during the pandemic and are available on like the David Lynch Foundation website and I think TM Talks. But he's been very involved. And so when he was saying that I should become a TM teacher, people were listening and people started donating money so that I could become a teacher, right? Like, you know, in that course. And here I was not even, you know, thinking about it, but it was like, well, if people are already donating, then maybe I'll do it. Maybe it's the time for me to do it. So I did. And it absolutely was. It was something that I'd been wanting for a long time. And I became a teacher, and then I moved back to Seattle. And here's a picture of when David Lynch came to Seattle, because he had been doing these tours of college campuses. And so we had a reunion there. And then there were many, many more events where this is Bob Roth on the left, and the lower left, who is Meditation Bob is his handle. And he's the one that is now the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation. That's me and David and Donovan, the legendary folk singer Donovan, who, you know, Hurdy-Gurdy Man, Season of the Witch, Mellow Yellow, all those great songs. So he had been in India with the Beatles and Maharishi, and came on board as the head of the musical wing of the David Lynch Foundation. And so I worked with so many great people, and then of course, you know, many, many events with David after that. And his book, Catching the Big Fish, came out. People really started to get interested in meditation. I asked him, you know, like, hey, social media was just kind of, I mean, I had been so offline for years before that, because I'd been living in meditation centers and, you know, just not really been connected on the internet. So at the time, MySpace was really big, and I talked to him about doing like a MySpace page for the foundation, and just because of David and who he is and how popular he is, and everybody loves him, and for good reason. He's an amazing person. You know, the MySpace page soon had like 80,000 people connected to it. And so we started doing a lot of events, and I would connect with a lot of his fans and supporters that way, which was really fun. And I met a lot of great musicians and organized some events myself. And David was also really interested in doing benefit concerts and music related events, because he's a musician in addition to being a great filmmaker. And his friend Christabel actually did the very first David Lynch Foundation benefit concert. And so I flew down from Seattle for this. On the left is her on the Santa Monica Pier. And then on the right is a photo that I took backstage at one of the David Lynch weekends in Fairfield, Iowa. She also was Tammy on Twin Peaks, the third season of Twin Peaks, for anyone that is a fan of that, which at the time, honestly, when I started working with David, I had not seen Twin Peaks, but now anyone who knows me knows that I'm kind of a mega Twin Peaks nerd as well, but love it. So we had a lot of David Lynch weekends where many people came together, and it was just a really, really good time. And I mean, I could go on. I could literally make like a 5-hour video just about David Lynch and David Lynch weekends. So I'm kind of gonna just like move through this, but this was a really amazing experience, obviously. And here I am with David on stage. We had the last David Lynch weekend was in 2009. It was following the major benefit concert at Radio City Music Hall that George Verschoor, who was the I think the creator or the first producer of The Real World on MTV. He produced this amazing concert. It had Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr came together for the first time in like 20 years and performed, and Moby, Donovan, Ben Harper, Eddie Vedder, Sheryl Crow, Betty LaVette, like anyone and everyone, and it was phenomenal. And so after that, we had another David Lynch weekend soon after, and then I went to Los Angeles and was working with a lot of the student affiliates and volunteers there. So this was that last weekend. I had helped design, well, the designers who made this, I worked with them really closely. And then when I first got to Los Angeles, we had a Donovan concert. Donovan had asked me to be involved in like working on concerts, bringing artists together to perform his music, and his son-in-law, Jason Rothberg, was working on that. And so he brought me in, and that was one of the first things I did in LA, which was really, really good. So this brings me to the Los Angeles era. I moved there in 2009 and was working for the David Lynch Foundation a little bit. And then I actually took some time off. I was having some health issues, and I didn't know, like, you know, what I was going to do, but I ended up working in production for a little while. And then I wanted to go back to teaching TM, and I contacted the Beverly Hills TM Center and like, yes, we need you right now. Like, can you come Monday? We have 10 people lined up. We need a teacher. And the reason was that Oprah Winfrey had just done a big special on Transcendental Meditation. She visited Fairfield, Iowa. Here she is meditating in those big Golden Dome buildings. And so a lot of people were wanting to learn TM at that time. And I wanted to open up a center in Los Angeles. So here is Natasha Berkowitz, and her husband, Jesse Berkowitz, and we opened up this center on Hillhurst. And it was an amazing experience. I worked on the design and worked with the architects to, had this idea of like a room where the sliding doors would come and open up and create a bigger space so we could fit more people. We had so many great group meditations and amazing people come through that center. It was such a good, just phenomenal experience, and always really fun. And there's some more pictures of the center. And yeah, so we had, a lot of people come together for our weekly group meditations and knowledge meetings, and so many great speakers. Like this is Mark Bunn, who wrote Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health, a book about Ayurveda. And here he is giving a talk about Ayurveda. And I hosted a lot of events with different Twin Peaks people because I am such a David Lynch Twin Peaks fan. This is Tammy Baird, who was Lorraine in season 3 of Twin Peaks, and John Pericello, who played Chad, the infamous Chad. And they're great. And so they came and talked about their experiences with TM. We had like our fall celebration, and it was really sweet. So yeah, I had so many moments sitting in this room, one-on-one working with people, meditating, instructing, and it was so special, and just a phenomenal time that I'm extremely grateful for. And honestly, I thought for sure I'd be doing this forever. I loved my job. This was like the best job to have in Los Angeles as far as I'm concerned, and I was so happy with it. But I had started to have kind of a feeling or like a pull that someday I might want to do something else. And maybe I'll make another video about that particularly, but it did change a lot. In 2018, I had a really profound experience that changed my life. And it was not an easy experience to go through, but it was also really beautiful in the long run. And I had gone through a lot of loss and grief, and really working very deeply on myself and my own personal traumas and issues. And I just felt like it was going to be time to do something different. And I ended up going back to Fairfield, Iowa, going on like a very long retreat for a while, and doing more Ayurveda and Panchakarma and figuring out what I wanted to do. And it was a phenomenally transformative time. And I did end up getting a great job working remotely for the Maharishi Foundation, working on what then was very private and not yet released, and is still not totally a public project, but there was things in the works to help support people to learn transcendental meditation wherever they were, so that people could, so that more people can learn comfortably. And so I worked with an amazing, phenomenal team of people, very talented, very smart. And Tony Nader, who is the head of that project, was who still is the head of that project, again, coming back full circle moment to, you know, this picture of the Lancaster Maharishi Ayurveda Health Center, where, you know, Deepak Chopra used to work, and Tony Nader used to work, and Dr. Jay Glazer, and where I started working in 1998, January 1st, 1998. So 25 years ago, kind of crazy, hard to believe. But Tony Nader has many great things that I've gotten to dive deeply into as part of my job and working on content for this training program, this technology that we've been developing. And one of them is Consciousness course, which is available through the Maharishi University Continuing Education. And he also has really good podcasts on YouTube and, you know, wherever else you listen to podcasts. So he has a lot of great discussions with different people talking about consciousness. So it's been an amazing, amazing time. And, you know, at some point I just started to feel like life is really short. When you have an experience of a lot of loss and grief, you really start to feel how quickly it can all go by. And I've been doing this my entire adult life. I've been working for this organization in different capacities. And I really felt like it was time for me to start working on my own projects and to really see what is it that I want to do. And that became more clear to me. And I'll talk about it more on this channel and different outlets, but it is different from Transcendental Meditation. Some of it, I still love TM. It's still my daily practice, like I said, and I always want people to learn and to discover it for themselves and to practice, because it puts you in touch with yourself at such a deep level and helps you develop your own creativity and intelligence and you know, just flourish with more love and joy and happiness. And who doesn't want that? You know, and this is how we have peace in the world, as we have peaceful individuals. And, you know, I also really, like I said, when I started to kind of dive into my own personal stuff really deeply in 2018, especially, but in the few years leading up to that, I'd say starting in 2014, and then my dad passed away in 2016. But like around that time, I knew I wanted to do something different, but I didn't know what yet. And it became more clear over the next few years. And part of it is like, I think it's important to experience different things and to not get too wrapped up in any identity or belief system or structure. And I think it's really important to be open and to be really exploratory about who you are and what's out there in the world and the universe, and to understand other people and other perspectives, even if you don't agree with it, even if, you know, but just to learn. And I think this is one way also that we start to break down these barriers and boundaries between us is just through understanding, and really quite simply love. But also understanding and compassion. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some of the new things that I am working on and sharing with the world. And I'm really, really extremely grateful. I'm so grateful for Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and his teacher, Guru Dev, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who was the Shankaracharya of Jyotir Math. And you know, again, and also my parents, again, this photo taken by my dad on my mom's teacher training course. I'm so grateful that I had access to these tools from a young age, even though like I didn't always want them and I didn't want to have anything to do with them. And I had access to them and they were there. And I hope that everyone has access to tools that help them through tough times, and to help them develop and to see who they really are. So with that, thank you.